Hey, welcome back to the lecture. So, from this lecture onwards, let's learn about functions in C. Let's learn how to write functions, what is a function prototype, and how to call function, and we'll understand various other things related to functions. So, in C, you write executable statements inside a function. For example, so here, let's say in this program, so I cannot cut this code and I can't put this code here. This is actually an executable C statement, right? So we cannot keep this outside the function. So this is illegal in C. So it has to be inside a function. So all the codes that is executable statements must be inside the body of the function. Of course, you can do a variable definition outside the scope of a function, no problem. So even you can initialize that variable. So this is nothing but variable initialization. So that you can do outside the scope of a function. But the executable statements has to be inside the function. So in C, a C function is nothing but collection of statements to perform a specific task. So every C program at least has one function called main. So using functions bring modularity to your code. It is easy to debug, modify, and increases the maintainability of the code. Using C function also minimizes code size and minimizes code redundancy. Functions provide abstraction. For example, printf is a function given by standard library code. So you need not to worry about how it is implemented and it serves your purpose, right? So in your program, if you want to perform the same set of tasks again and again, then create a function to do that task and call it every time you need to perform that task. So the main aim of using function is to reduce the code redundancy in the program, and it brings more modularity to your program and also decreases the final executable size of your program. So this is a general form of a function definition in C. So when you write a function, you first have to give a name for the function, a proper name. So you can follow the same rules what you use to write a variable name. And the function always comes with parentheses. And inside the parentheses, you have to mention the parameter list. So these are the input parameters or input arguments to the function. And also, you may mention the return data type, that is, the data type of the data which the function returns. So a function may return a value or it may not return a value. So we'll see more about this as we make a progress. So this is called as a function prototype. So a function prototype says its return type, the function's name, and its parameter list. And after that, you have to use these curly brackets, which actually gives the body of the function. And inside the body of the function, you have to write your executable C statements. Let's see one example. All right, so I'm ready with my new project. Let's say functions.c. So let's first write the main function. So main is also a function like any other function, which has a function body, return type, the parameter list. So, but there are two ways you can define a main function in your program according to the standard. So let's explore them. So you can give main function definition in two ways. One is this one. This is a main function definition with no input arguments. Here you can see that there are no input arguments. So when there are no input arguments, you can mention it as void, or you can just leave like this with just a parenthesis, no problem. So this is another main function definition with two input arguments. So now these arguments also called as command line arguments. So we don't use this definition of main for embedded systems because most of the time there are no command line arguments in embedded system programming. So that's why we usually don't use this main function definition. So we usually use this. Let's write that. So, and when you write the main function, always make sure that the return type is int. That is, this function has to return an integer data by using return statement. Let's write return 0. Let's explore some more points about main. So main takes only 0 or 2 arguments. Main function returns the status of the program to the parent process. So in this case, the parent process is actually the operating system, right? So because we are actually writing application for our Windows PC or our machine. So here there is the operating system, and operating system launches the application. So when the application ends, that application returns a code back to the OS. And by that, OS comes to know whether that process is terminated properly or not. So main function returns the status of the program to the parent process, showing the success or failure of the program. So 0 means success and non-zero means error. Alright, so now let's write a function to add two numbers. So now first let me give a function name. So let's call the function name as function add numbers. And after that, let's give the parenthesis and let's write here the argument list or parameter list. So let's say this function takes three input arguments. So let me call it as int a, int b, and int c. These are the three input parameters of the function add numbers. And let me decide that this function doesn't return anything. So no return value. So that's why in that case you have to mention the keyword void here. So void is the return type. So that means the function doesn't return anything. And after that, let's give the function body. So you have to open two curly brackets. So this is called as function definition. And after that, inside the function, you have to write the code to add two numbers or add three numbers. Let me create one more variable, sum. So sum is equal to a plus b plus c. So remember that this variable and these variables are same. So all these are local scope variables. So it is just that these are mentioned to receive the input values for the function. So these are also called as formal parameters, or you can just call them as local scope variables, no problem. And after that, let's print the sum. Sum is equal to %d/n, and let me print the sum. Right. So now whenever you want to add three numbers, just call this function. You can call it from main or you can call it from some other function. So that means this function is dedicated to add three numbers. Let's see how to call this function. So let's say I want to call this function from main. So I go to the main and I write the function name, and then I open the parenthesis, and after that you have to give semicolon. So this is function calling, and here you have to pass the arguments to the function. So this function takes three input values of type int. So you have to do according to that. So you have to pass three integer values when you call this function. So let's use three integer values. Let's say 12, 13, 14. I can call this function one more time. So I can mention -20 plus 20, 14. And after that, you can even pass variables as arguments. Let's say you have int value a is equal to 90, and let's say value b is equal to 70. You can even do something like this. So you can pass value a, value b, and third argument you can pass anything you want. So let's say 90. So this is also a legal statement. So it can be combination of a number and variables. And after that, so now let's see how it goes. Let me try to compile. So I tried to compile this and there are various warnings, and now let's try to understand one by one. The first warning is implicit declaration of function add numbers. So that means for the compiler, before calling a function, you have to declare that. In the same way, what you did for variables. So before using a variable, you have to define a variable, or at least you have to declare a variable that it is exists somewhere, right? So same rule you have to follow for functions as well. Before using that function, you have to declare to the compiler that it exists somewhere. And we do that by using something called function declaration, or it is also called as function prototyping. Let's explore about function prototyping or function declaration.